In a galaxy teeming with predators forged by the harshest worlds, the Deathworlders believed themselves invincible, unmatched in strength and resilience. But when they stumbled upon the eerie remains of Earth and the cryptic legacy of a vanished humanity, they unwittingly awakened an ancient terror. What the Deathworlders failed to realize was that humanity hadn't disappeared, they had evolved, leaving behind a deadly trap and a chilling warning: do not follow us. For countless millennia, the galaxy's most formidable beings, those born on Deathworlds, believed themselves to be alone at the apex of existence. These were species shaped by planets so unrelenting that survival itself was a triumph of evolution. The Vorax, a towering insectoid race, had exoskeletons so dense they could withstand the searing acid rains of their volcanic homeworld. The Krishar, living amidst perpetual blizzards and frigid oceans, developed internal biothermal systems that allowed them to thrive where lesser beings would freeze solid. Across these deadly worlds, other species emerged, each more extraordinary than the last, shaped by environments where nature allowed no weakness and evolution permitted no failure. Separated by vast stretches of uncharted void, the Deathworlders rarely ventured beyond their own domains. The risks of interstellar exploration outweighed the potential gains, for the empty expanse between stars seemed to offer little promise. The void was a graveyard of those who dared challenge it, their vessels lost to the dark without a trace. Over time they accepted this solitude, content to reign supreme in their isolated realms. The galaxy, it seemed, had no rivals worth discovering. Yet perception shifted when a signal appeared. It was faint at first, a ripple in the vast silence of the cosmos, detectable only to the most advanced sensors. The signal bore a rhythmic consistency that defied the randomness of natural phenomena. Intrigued, the Deathworlders turned their instruments toward the unknown beacon. The signal, though simple, carried a frequency that screamed of deliberate intent. It was a crafted message, not some cosmic anomaly. Each Deathworlder species studied it in secret, wary of revealing their discoveries to potential rivals. For the first time in countless ages, the possibility arose that they might not be alone. Debate raged within their councils. Some argued for ignoring the signal entirely, fearing it might be a trap. Others, emboldened by the pride of their evolution, insisted on investigating. Whatever intelligence had created the signal, they reasoned, could not possibly match the strength and resilience of a species forged on a Deathworld. The signal emanated from a star system located near the edge of a neglected galactic arm. No prior surveys had charted anything significant in this region, only a few barren planets and a nondescript yellow star. Yet as their probes and ships neared the source, they confirmed the existence of a singular planet, teeming with conditions that supported life. The planet's surface revealed a stark anomaly. Its landscapes were lush with vegetation, its atmosphere breathable, and its climate temperate, unlike the brutal extremes that define Deathworlds. To these species, it appeared impossibly serene, almost artificial in its balance. The signal's origin was traced to a specific point on the planet, an ancient structure housing an array of damaged but functioning machinery. There were no signs of its creators, no sentinels, no civilizations, only silence and the faint hum of the broadcast. The Deathworlders landed, each one convinced of their superiority, unaware that they were not the hunters in this scenario, but prey walking into a trap centuries in the making. The Deathworlders' ships descended cautiously through Earth's atmosphere, their sophisticated sensors scouring the planet for any signs of danger. To their astonishment, there were no defense systems, no hidden armies, and no aggressive signals to intercept their approach. Earth, despite its technological remnants, appeared utterly defenseless. Yet this lack of resistance only heightened their unease. From orbit, Earth was deceptively beautiful. Vast blue oceans shimmered under the light of its sun, punctuated by sprawling continents lush with green. Clouds swirled in intricate patterns, painting the skies in hues of white and gray. To the Deathworlders, it was an alien concept. On their worlds, beauty came with danger: volcanoes erupting against sulfurous skies, or glaciers reflecting sharp, cold sunlight. Here, the tranquility felt disarming, as if it were a mask concealing something far more sinister. When they set foot on the planet, the quiet was almost oppressive. The ruins of cities lay beneath blankets of creeping vines and moss. Skyscrapers, their facades cracked and corroded, rose like the skeletal remains of a long-dead giant. Streets, once bustling with life, were now silent pathways for weeds and small animals. Vehicles rusted where they had been abandoned, some partially buried under layers of sediment and debris. It was as if time had slowly consumed the world after its inhabitants had vanished. The Deathworlders, creatures accustomed to survival amidst unrelenting hostility, moved cautiously through these empty landscapes. They examined the architecture, finding evidence of a species that had once flourished here. Buildings suggested intelligence and ingenuity, structures designed not merely for survival but for comfort, innovation, and culture. Earth's cities spoke of a civilization that had embraced complexity and creativity. Yet there was no sign of what had become of its creators. Even more perplexing were the planet's ecosystems. Though its cities lay in ruin, nature thrived. Forests reclaimed the land, rivers carved new paths, and wildlife roamed freely. It was as though Earth itself was healing, indifferent to the absence of the beings who had once shaped it. Some of the Deathworlders speculated that humanity might have perished in a global catastrophe, leaving the planet to recover in their absence. Yet others, sensing the deliberate placement of the signal and the lingering energy signatures, believed that humanity had left intentionally. The machinery responsible for the broadcast was a particular point of focus. Positioned atop a weathered platform in one of the ruined cities, the array looked ancient but was still operational. Its design was efficient yet enigmatic, composed of alloys and circuits unfamiliar even to the technologically advanced Deathworlders. Attempts to decode the signal revealed it was a basic message, a greeting, simple yet profound. The Deathworlders found no evidence of recent activity around the array, nor any signs of life that might have maintained it. It had been left to operate autonomously, a lone sentinel broadcasting humanity's presence into the void. But the message was not one of strength or warning. Instead, it seemed to be an invitation, or perhaps a puzzle. As the days stretched into weeks, their unease grew. There was no trace of warfare or disaster to explain the abandonment of this world. The absence of life was total, yet it lacked the chaos one would expect from a mass extinction. It was as though humanity had simply packed up and vanished. To a galaxy of beings accustomed to conflict and survival, this quiet disappearance was the most unnerving mystery of all. The Deathworlders turned their focus to uncovering the story of humanity, determined to piece together the mystery of a civilization that had vanished so completely. In the ruins of Earth, they found countless relics left behind, objects that bore silent testimony to a species once defined by ingenuity, creativity, and relentless adaptability. The artifacts painted a vivid portrait of humanity's rise from humble beginnings to technological mastery. But the absence of the people who created them cast a shadow over every discovery. Their explorations unearthed everything from primitive stone tools to intricate devices of advanced design. Humanity, it seemed, had an insatiable drive to improve, innovate, and overcome. They uncovered vast libraries of data, preserved within durable storage devices or etched into resilient physical media. The Deathworlders, with their advanced deciphering technologies, slowly translated these archives, revealing histories, sciences, and stories that spoke to humanity's tenacity. What struck them most was humanity's cooperative nature. Unlike the Deathworlders, who had risen in isolation, clawing their way to dominance in brutal and unforgiving environments, humanity had achieved its greatness by working together. The archives told of rivalries, conflicts, and struggles, but also of alliances, shared visions, and an almost incomprehensible ability to forgive and unite. In the face of overwhelming challenges, humanity had chosen to collaborate, pooling its resources and knowledge to overcome obstacles that would have broken more solitary species. Yet this unity did not mean weakness. Humanity's history was laced with battles fought against impossible odds. The Deathworlders found evidence of wars, revolutions, and catastrophes that had tested humanity's resolve. But rather than crumble, humanity adapted, emerging stronger each time. This resilience resonated with the Deathworlders, who began to realize that humanity, for all its apparent frailty, was a kindred spirit of survival. As they delved deeper into humanity's archives, they discovered records of humanity's expansion into the stars. Early spacecraft, fragile by Deathworlder standards, had carried humans to their moon, neighboring planets, and eventually beyond their solar system. Colonies were established on distant worlds, linked by an expanding network of technology and communication. Humanity had seemed poised to claim its place among the stars, forging a presence across the galaxy. But then the trail went cold. The Deathworlders found scattered references to an event, a moment in humanity's timeline when their growth had stopped, their focus shifted, and their efforts turned inward. The details were fragmented, deliberately erased or obscured. Some files were corrupted, others locked behind layers of encryption even the Deathworlders struggled to breach. What little they could uncover hinted at a crisis, a challenge so profound it had shaken humanity to its core. In the ruins of Earth's cities, they found more troubling clues. Cratered landscapes and scorch marks suggested battles fought with energy weapons far more advanced than anything humanity had initially developed. Yet there were no bodies, no mass graves, and no lingering signs of disease or natural disaster. Humanity had not died here, it had disappeared. The absence of answers gnawed at the Deathworlders. Humanity's legacy was everywhere, but their creators were nowhere to be found. It was as though an entire species had erased itself from the galaxy, leaving behind only questions and the faint echo of a warning, "Do not follow." The warning unearthed beneath Earth's surface cast a shadow over the Deathworlders' mission, though few were willing to admit it. "Do not follow" was simple, direct, and yet profoundly unsettling. It was repeated in multiple languages, encoded within resilient holographic systems that had endured centuries. What could have driven humanity, a species so evidently resourceful and unyielding, to leave such a stark message? To the Deathworlders, who prided themselves on thriving against all odds, it seemed inconceivable. Many dismissed the warning outright. Humanity, they reasoned, must have been a fragile species, overreacting to a challenge they couldn't face. Perhaps they'd fled out of fear, retreating to some distant part of the galaxy to avoid an enemy or catastrophe. The Deathworlders, hardened by their own brutal histories, could not imagine any force strong enough to compel them to abandon their worlds. Instead of heeding the caution, they saw the warning as an insult, a sign of weakness from a species that could not compare to their own. But not everyone was so dismissive. Among the exploration crews, there were whispers of unease. The more cautious minds began to notice patterns that defied simple explanations. The ruins of Earth showed no clear evidence of a natural disaster, no sign of a mass extinction event, no lingering traces of chemical or biological warfare. Everything was just gone. Humanity had vanished deliberately, taking most of their resources, knowledge, and even their dead with them. It was a clean retreat, meticulously executed, with minimal traces left behind. When the Deathworlders expanded their search beyond Earth, the mystery only deepened. The abandoned human colonies scattered throughout nearby systems revealed more fragments of the story. On some planets, entire cities had been evacuated, leaving behind buildings and infrastructure eerily intact. On others, there were signs of battles fought on a scale the Deathworlders had rarely seen. Vast craters burned into the ground, melted debris fused into alien landscapes. Yet even here, there were no bodies, no remnants of the enemy humanity had faced. In one such colony, the Deathworlders found a chilling message carved into the remains of a massive metallic monolith. "This is not a refuge. Do not stay." The words struck a nerve. They had expected to find humanity's failures proof that the species had been unprepared for the challenges of galactic life. Instead, they found calculated warnings, deliberately left to deter anyone from following the same path. The data collected from these colonies painted an incomplete picture, but one thing was clear: humanity's disappearance had not been random. It had been intentional, a retreat rather than an extinction. They were running from something the Deathworlders could not yet identify. Meanwhile, anomalies began to plague their exploration efforts. Ships reported strange malfunctions, with systems going offline without explanation. Instruments picked up fleeting energy signatures that appeared and disappeared too quickly to analyze. Shadowy forms were seen on the edges of their sensors, always just out of reach. The Deathworlders dismissed these phenomena as errors or coincidence, refusing to acknowledge the growing sense of unease creeping into their crews. But they were not alone. Whatever humanity had fled was stirring, drawn to the activity of the Deathworlders like moths to a flame. They had ignored the warning, and now they were being watched. The longer the Deathworlders remained in the abandoned colonies, the more it became clear that something was amiss. Their growing unease, which had begun as little more than a subtle whisper at the back of their minds, gradually turned into a full-fledged sense of foreboding. They were no longer alone, and they could feel it. The strange energy readings, the vanishing probes, the inexplicable malfunctions, they all pointed toward an ominous truth that the Deathworlders could no longer ignore. Whatever had driven humanity away had not been a single threat. It was a force far more complex, more pervasive, and infinitely more dangerous than they had imagined. One by one, the Deathworlder ships began to experience more severe disruptions. Communications were suddenly jammed, their long-range sensors flickering with static as if a giant, unseen presence was pushing back against them. Then came the first direct encounter. A fleet of Deathworlder scouts, stationed on the outskirts of a system that had once been a human colony, vanished without a trace. Attempts to contact them yielded nothing but eerie silence, followed by a strange series of power surges that momentarily overwhelmed their own ships. The remaining Deathworlder commanders, who had been so confident in their superiority, were now forced to confront the possibility that they had underestimated the situation. What they were dealing with was not some natural phenomenon, nor was it any force the galaxy had known. It was as if something ancient, something unknowable, was actively hunting them. There were no visual sightings, no obvious predator stalking them in the shadows. But the absence of something was more terrifying than the presence of an enemy. They were being hunted by a force that remained hidden, always just out of sight, yet undeniably real. The cracks in their resolve began to show. Leaders of various factions, once united in their belief of Deathworlder supremacy, now began to argue over strategy. Some suggested retreating, others proposed forming a defensive perimeter around their fleet, trying to wait out whatever threat was creeping toward them. Yet even as they debated, they could feel the presence of something vast, a force that seemed to be closing in, slowly but relentlessly. There was no escaping it. It was on a routine mission to scan a particularly remote planet that the Deathworlders finally received their first clear sign of the entity that had been watching them. The planet, an isolated, seemingly lifeless rock orbiting a dead star, had once been a research outpost for humanity. Upon landing, they found nothing of interest, at first only derelict structures and signs of an evacuation. But as they scoured the planet for any useful data, something within the ancient equipment powered up. A series of dormant systems flickered to life as if triggered by their presence. The Deathworlders were no longer in control of their own movements. Suddenly, the planet's once dormant atmosphere reacted violently. Energy surges flared in the sky, violent storms ripped through the land, and the ground itself trembled, as if the planet itself were alive. The Deathworlders tried to escape, but their ships, too, were drawn into the disturbance. It wasn't the planet that was alive, it was something buried beneath it, something that had been waiting. The last transmission sent from the planet, before the communication system was severed entirely, was a single, chilling message: "We told you not to follow." The message wasn't from humanity, it was from something older, something far more ancient. And it was only now, as they stood on the edge of this revelation, that the Deathworlders realized the full extent of their mistake. They had ignored the warnings, convinced they were the superior force, and now they were about to face the consequences. Whatever humanity had run from was no longer content to stay buried. It was awakening, and the Deathworlders had unwittingly triggered its return. As the Deathworlders scrambled to regain control over their ships, it became clear that they were no longer in command of the situation. The planet's atmosphere churned with energy, and their technology, so advanced and invincible just days ago, now faltered under an unseen force. Their ships groaned as though they were alive, straining against a power that bent the very laws of physics. Every attempt to break free of the gravitational pull of the planet, to escape the storm that had risen from the depths of the ancient world, ended in failure. The Deathworlders were trapped in a maelstrom of cosmic energy, their ships malfunctioning and their systems crashing one after another. The realization hit them like a physical blow. The force that had driven humanity from their homeworld, the force that had remained hidden for so long, had awoken. And it was not a force bound by the same laws that governed the galaxy. The Deathworlders had underestimated it, believing that no entity could rival their own abilities to survive and adapt. But now, as their ships shuddered and alarms blared, they were faced with an overwhelming, unfathomable truth. This was not something they could conquer with weapons or technology. The energy storms intensified, and strange waves of distortion rippled through space, warping the very fabric of reality itself. The Deathworlders had never encountered anything like this. Their most advanced sensors, their most sophisticated technology, could not pierce the veil of whatever was pulling them into the heart of the storm. The sky above them, once filled with distant stars, was now a swirling mass of energy, a vortex of chaos that seemed to feed off their every move. Every communication attempt to other ships in the fleet failed, their signals cut off by invisible forces that blocked their transmissions. The ancient warning that had been left by humanity echoed in their minds again: do not follow us. They had ignored it. They had pressed forward, believing that they were capable of surviving anything. Now they were learning the hard way that some forces were beyond their understanding. In desperation, the Deathworlders turned to their remaining resources. Scientists aboard the ships attempted to analyze the energy field surrounding them, trying to find some way to reverse the damage or disrupt the forces at work. But the more they studied it, the more it became apparent that they were not dealing with a natural phenomenon or a technological malfunction. This was something else, a sentient force, alive in a way that defied comprehension. The energy was not random, it was deliberate, controlled, and it seemed to respond to the presence of the Deathworlders as though it were aware of them. As the ships were slowly dragged deeper into the storm, their once proud technology now reduced to a series of broken and flickering systems, the Deathworlders found themselves fighting not against an enemy they could battle, but against the very fabric of existence itself. It was as though reality itself was unraveling around them, forcing them to confront the terrifying possibility that they were not the apex survivors of the galaxy after all. In their final moments of communication, the Deathworlders received a transmission not from their fleet, but from a distant, unfamiliar source. The message was brief, a voice laced with centuries of weariness and regret. You should have listened. Now, you will join us. The transmission was cut short as the energy storm overwhelmed the last of the Deathworlder ships, their systems imploding in a burst of radiant light. One by one, their vessels were consumed by the storm, swallowed by the ancient force that had been waiting for so long. The Deathworlders, in all their power, had become nothing more than another chapter in the history of a force that had outlived even the civilization they had sought to uncover. The storm that had swallowed the Deathworlders' fleet did not dissipate. In the silence that followed their destruction, the energy of the ancient force remained, hanging in the atmosphere like a lingering presence. The storms on the planet continued to rage, and the energy surges that had previously destabilized the Deathworlder ships began to subside. But something else emerged in their place, a quiet, unsettling calm that was more unnerving than the chaos that had preceded it. What had been a devastating, unrelenting force now felt like something far older and far more patient. The Deathworlders had been nothing more than an unwelcome disturbance in a much larger, deeper narrative. The force had not acted in haste, nor had it seemed to regard the Deathworlders as a significant threat. They had been pawns swept up in the tide of an ancient intelligence that had been watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The storm had not been a violent outburst, it had been a calculated response to an intrusion. As the last of the Deathworlder ships disappeared from the planet's orbit, the survivors of their brief, ill-fated expedition became part of the unspoken truth that humanity had already known. There were forces in the universe so ancient, so beyond comprehension, that even the mightiest of civilizations could not survive their awakening. The Deathworlders, so sure of their place at the top of the food chain, had failed to grasp this fundamental truth. They had assumed that they were the ultimate survivors, and in their arrogance they had awakened something far greater than themselves. In the aftermath, there was no fanfare, no triumphant declaration. There was only the lingering silence of a universe that had gone on, indifferent to the deaths of the proud and the powerful. The energy signatures faded, the storms eventually calmed, and the planet fell back into the shadow of its forgotten past. The Deathworlders' search had been their undoing, and the very thing they had been hunting had turned its gaze upon them. Now, they were lost to the void, their civilization reduced to nothing more than a footnote in the larger, incomprehensible history of the galaxy. Yet, as the Deathworlders' ships vanished into the storm, the ancient force did not leave. It remained dormant for now, but never forgotten. It had once been humanity's greatest fear. The reason they fled, the force that had made their world uninhabitable. But humanity had been wise enough to leave a warning, a message etched into the ruins of Earth, warning others not to make the same mistake. And yet, the Deathworlders had ignored it, convinced of their superiority. Now, they were part of the galaxy's dark history, a cautionary tale that few would hear. The galaxy moved on, as it always did, indifferent to the deaths of the powerful. But for those who understood the warnings left by humanity, the lesson was clear: some forces in the universe were not to be trifled with. Humanity had learned that lesson long ago, and now the Deathworlders had learned it too. The universe, vast and unknowable, had shown its true face, and for those who dared to seek out its darkest corners, the consequences were far more dire than they could ever have imagined. As the last remnants of the Deathworlders' fleet were absorbed into the blackness of space, a faint, distant echo of humanity's warning lingered in the silence we told you not to follow. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Horizon Stories for more thrilling tales of science fiction and adventure.